Impromptu live, I felt compelled to go on and talk about the developments in and around the White House in the US. Joe Biden, very much in the spotlight right now. A day or two ago, I made a video about Joe Biden and talked about the debate from now a few days back. Essentially, what I was saying was that I did think his performance had been poor. I did think that he didn't really make total sense at some points. He seemed to lack energy. He seemed to lose place, space, perhaps even time from moment to moment here and there. But again, there were places where he did make sense. Now, the speculation has reached almost fever pitch about what was going on. In the video that I made, I really didn't get into that because, well, I'll come on to why I didn't get into that. I left it out and focused mainly on looking at some clips of Joe's performance from a few days ago and also from about 4 years ago to compare. And certainly, as far as those clips were concerned, he had more energy. He appeared to be more focused. And it would seem, unsurprisingly, that over a 4-year period, given his age, that he does appear to be less robust, more feeble. I again, don't like to use that word, but that is how, at least on screen, he's coming across. And feeble in terms of there's a lack of vigour when he moves, and his voice from time to time seems to grow faint and soft and almost like a whisper. I know he does that whisper thing sometimes for effect. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just almost like the energy running out. And I think that when you put all that together, again, the gist of the earlier video that I made, he just doesn't look like he is on the ball enough. And I don't think that this is a good look for the country, for the US. It's not a good look for the Western world. It's just generally, in terms of leadership, not a good look. Now, I have said in the past that it is important to look at substance. It's important to look at the content of an argument, the logic or lack thereof, and forget about whether someone looks presidential. Kind of silly in some ways, but we're all prone to judging, whether we like it or not, based on how some people look and how they sound. And that is hard to get away from. It's kind of built in from our time in tribes, and in many ways we are still in tribes. However, I think with the importance of the role that Joe Biden is in, we need to understand that there is substance. We need to feel comfortable that there is substance. And with that substance, there needs to be a sense that this individual is capable. They're on top of things. They are mentally astute and acute enough. And unfortunately for Joe Biden, I think in that debate, well, it fell down on both those counts, because although he said some things that were okay, they seemed to have an element of sense to them, and his rebuttal of some of Trump's arguments, if I could call them that, it was fine, but not always. And when he went down into what I have called the abyss, into the chasm, where he lacked energy and lacked focus and lacked cohesion, that was so startling, and it was so painful actually to watch, that the other stuff that was substance related, I've got to be careful. I better add more to that sentence, that was related to the substance of his argument. Then Well, it was diminished. So overall, what I think a lot of people walked away with was a bit of shock, a bit of surprise, a bit of concern for how he came across in those moments when he did seem to be a bit wandered, which diminished any substance that was there. And of course, because he was wandered in those moments and lost energy, then the style wasn't good either. This is a double whammy for Biden and his team. Meanwhile, again, I know a lot of people don't like Trump, don't like what he represents, don't like pretty much anything that he says, and certainly call him out for lies, a lack of veracity, etc., etc. But it's hard to dispute that Trump was vigorous, particularly compared to Biden in that debate. And also it's hard to dispute that Trump, whether you agree with his arguments or not, had some flow to them, had some logic. And yes, you may be shouting at the screen right now and saying, oh, hold on a second, but so that was a lie and that was a lie and that was a lie. I can't speak to that. That's not what I'm talking about here. I haven't gone and fact-checked what he said, but also haven't gone and fact-checked what Biden said. And just contrasting these two styles, and that Biden's style and substance lacked compared to Trump's. And one of the issues with these two individuals is, of course, Biden has looked a bit shaky, no pun intended, genuinely, no pun intended, has looked a bit shaky in terms of his vigour, his attention to detail, his ability to be in the moment and be truly present for a few years. And Trump, on the other hand, again, despite the cries of that's not true, that's fake, that's a lie, etc., has generally overall seemed more vigorous. And so where does that leave us then? Where does it leave us in terms of the aftermath of that debate? Well, a couple of things. A lot of people have been concerned by Biden's mental acuity or lack thereof for quite some time. But it is as if from this debate, the blinkers have come off, and they've come off part of the media and part of the press who were up until this point, or up until recently, very supportive of Biden, very forgiving of him, almost the emperor's new clothes type thing. In fact, perhaps the emperor's new clothes. The emperor is wearing clothes. Biden is totally robust because we've told you so. He's always on the ball because we've told you so. And hey, why would we say anything different? Well, we might come on to that. But now people are looking at this situation and thinking, that isn't exactly true, is it? He's definitely not who he was 4 years ago, and he definitely did not do a good job in that debate, no matter how people try and sugarcoat things. So then, if I jump back to the video that I made a few days ago, as I mentioned, I didn't get into trying to figure out what was wrong potentially with Biden, beyond being tired, beyond being fatigued. I have my thoughts about it. I'll touch on them here, but it is important to say up front that it is dangerous for anybody, armchair detectives, neurologists, MDs, GPs, neuroscientists, to diagnose at a distance, because that's dangerous. But we do need to observe some things. I think now this is important, and I'll come on to why I think this is an acute issue, having gone from something chronic that's been going on for quite some time. So, what we have seen with Biden in that debate, as I've mentioned, is him losing the place, losing the plot, is one of the colloquialisms where I'm from, forgetting what he was going to say, and seeming to pause and hesitate and maybe search for a word or the end of the sentence, or finish what he was saying in a slightly incongruous way. They've also seen him, when he's been moving, looking quite stiff and not fluid in his movements. Now again, he's 81. There are a lot of 81-year-olds who are mentally and physically vigorous, of course, but Biden doesn't seem to be one of them. And yes, there's now speculation because I only saw this yesterday, I think, but apparently there's been a visit from a movement specialist. So not actually someone who you might expect to be visiting the White House. And of course, because the sort of broader speciality of this physician is Parkinson's disease, specifically, it would seem, as my understanding, as looking at movement, then I think that people are putting two and two together. Now, maybe they're getting 22. Maybe that is a total coincidence. Maybe there is good reason for this physician to have been visiting the White House, and the White House has said, well, it's to do with the veterans that are there, and this medic offers clinics and advice, etc., etc. And so you say, well, okay, we should take that at face value and hope it's true. But let's presume it is true, and it could well be true. But what that's done is it has fueled even more speculation, because if you look at Room 101, what are some of the signs of Parkinson's disease, then unfortunately, Biden appears to have some of those. But that doesn't mean to say he has, which is my point. It does not mean to say that he has. But if you look at him through that lens, you can tick a few of the boxes. And I say that with the greatest respect and care, because if that is the case, if that is what's going on, then this is not good. And I feel for him as the individual, and I feel for his family. And again, we'll loop back to this speculation and consider what it might mean. But to continue with the speculation, other people have said, well, it's dementia. And again, if you know anything about dementia, you'll know there's different types of it for a kickoff. And also, you'll know that looking at Biden, you cannot say that. I mean, it might be, but there are a lot of people wandering around who've dementia, are very capable, and you couldn't tell. There are some people who look like they have and they don't, or at least they don't in terms of our understanding of what it may mean and the different types so far. There's a lot more to understand about that pernicious disease. And so, again, it is speculation. But let me come back to what I was going to say about the speculation. The fact that there is this tsunami of speculation, the fact that it would seem that up until this point, part of the press and media who've been extremely supportive have had the blinkers removed. Well, Biden's at the centre of a storm. I'm talking about Joe Biden here. He's absolutely at the centre of a storm. And he's going to be on 4K, 8K cameras. Every raise of the eyebrow, every hesitation, every slight mistake that he may make, which perhaps a year ago, or a couple of years ago, or 4 years ago, would have been dismissed. But now it's going to be amplified. And now it's going to be a lot tougher for him. And that's not a good place for him to be, in my opinion. I think that is, well, imagine if it was you. If you've ever stepped outside and somebody's recognised you unexpectedly, just one person, that could be a bit disconcerting. Oh, yeah, I saw you on Facebook or something. But imagine what it's like when the world is watching, and of course a rabid media. So we've got all the speculation. We don't know what is going on. Certainly I would veer more towards something to do with movement in terms of Joe Biden, and maybe that is dopamine related, which you'll probably guess what I mean by that, but we absolutely don't know. So because we have people saying Parkinson's disease, a movement specialist, a Parkinson's disease specialist, we've got other people saying dementia, then when you get to that level, you've got to do something about it. And what the White House have done is released a statement from Joe Biden's physician who said, something along the lines. Now, again, I don't want to paraphrase or leave out things, so I'm just going to generalize. This is not the exact wording at all, but along the lines of Joe's regularly examined and we found nothing unusual neurologically. And they flat out denied, the White House, that he has been treated for Parkinson's disease or is being treated for Parkinson's disease. If so, I'm really glad. And also, if that's true, and I hope it is true, then that's great, because it means that the White House is being open and transparent. You never know, there could be a slight get out of jail clause in there, in the sense that he's been treated for something else that may, in a secondary way, help him with some of those issues that he has with cognition and also with movement. But it may not be directly treatment for Parkinson's disease, and maybe it isn't to do with Parkinson's disease at all, and or some kind of dementia. And so what we have is a situation where Biden is under the spotlight, under intense scrutiny. He also has had to, through the team at the White House, deny anything is going on in terms of these purported, presumed by some, neurological issues. And yet at the same time, he hasn't taken an in-depth neurological exam as far as anyone is concerned. And maybe they don't want him to do that. Imagine also the pressure that Joe Biden will be under now. And if he feels any level of stress, if he's aware of the importance of doing such a test, that could cause him to score even lower than he might have done in the first place. So that hasn't happened. So in one sense, although you have a physician in the White House saying we found nothing untoward, what test did he take? What does that mean? How deeply did you look into that? And maybe they don't want to, because maybe there's a lot of the time when Joe is really sharp behind the scenes, and maybe he really does have his finger on the pulse of the nation, security, the geopolitical stuff that's going on around the planet, and so on. But unfortunately, it's all about optics. It is about substance, which I've said has been lacking, and it is about style, which I've said has been lacking. And so now, with this eye of the storm, this tsunami that Joe finds himself in the middle of, is his position tenable? And I ended the last video, the one that I recorded, saying no, I think he should step down. And I feel even more strongly about that at this point in time. Because what have we got? This is now a huge story, and that echoes around the planet. And there are people who, well, believe it or not, don't like the West, and they don't like the US. And they'll be looking for weakness. They'll be looking for a lack of strength, a lack of cohesion, a lack of agility, both in terms of trade and potentially, let's say, defence, put it that way around, but also the acuity to make decisions quite quickly when something arises and goes wrong. How do you deal with it? Who's in charge? Maybe Joe has a team of advisors to do that for him, but then, to me, he shouldn't be in that role, simply for that reason, because he's not doing the job. It's somebody else. So that's subterfuge, and I don't like that, if that's the case. We need honesty, we need transparency, and we need, I think, answers. I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of any of this stuff. However, I'll come back to this point about the optics, about how this looks around the world. And if we want democracy to be in place, if we want a democratic society, which the US is, and democracy, as somebody once said, it's not perfect, but it's better than the alternative. So if we want democracy, then it should be a fair contest. It should be one between two parties, in this instance, who have differing opinions, shall we say. Sometimes not huge in some areas. In other areas, yes, they are. So we need to hear what the debate is. We need to hear things being articulated. We need to understand what this party represents and what this leader represents. And I don't think we're going to get it with Joe. And I also don't think if you support Joe Biden or the Conservatives out there, then would you give the party a bigger or lesser chance of winning? I said Conservatives, and I meant Democrats, but Conservative. So Conservatives, no, Democrats. Would you give them a better chance of winning with Joe in charge or not? I say probably not, would be my opinion, but I'm not a voter in the States. I observe because it's important, and it's an important nation. And so the Democrats, I don't think, are likely to win against Trump. It would be, as it stands, a Republican victory. And if we want then democracy, it should be a fair fight. And for it to be a fair fight, it should be someone other than Joe Biden. Then we have who may be the most likely shoo-in. I would say it's probably Kamala Harris, because she's the vice president. And can she function in a debate? The answer might surprise you. I think yes, she can. You may have noticed some of the gaffes, so-called, that are out there these days. Essentially, Kamala really adopting almost what's been called a word salad approach to things. I think that is a lot to do with just running in, from one meeting to the other and not preparing. I think that's what that's about. I think if she was prepped properly, then she would be more likely to cause a more equal debate with Trump, more likely to actually ultimately win potentially, but certainly to make it a fairer contest. And so that's another reason that I think Joe should be out. So one, the optics for the rest of the planet are not good. It cannot be fun behind the scenes in the White House right now. And also, I think that if you want a fair fight, and I know that a lot of the Trump supporters are probably hoping that Biden stays, but if you want a fairer fight, then probably somebody to replace Biden, who could be Kamala Harris. And then maybe we're more likely to see democracy at work and understand what these parties and these leaders represent. So, what else? Well, the other thing is, if we look at Joe, the person. So here we have somebody who's 81. And in a longer version of the video that I recorded, but I just left half of it out, the second half out, I did say something along the lines of, if Joe Biden was your neighbour and you helped out with gardening and chatted over the garden wall or whatever, you'd probably think, hey, this guy's doing great. He's doing really well. He's 81, great smile, a little bit stiff when he moves, but his times he's really sharp. Occasionally, he seems to drift off, but yeah, he's doing great. And if that's my neighbour, your neighbour, our neighbour, this is all fine. But he's not, is he? He's the President of the United States. And so there's got to be a different standard of play at work. The President of the United States is somebody who needs to work at a different level from someone who can help us in the garden. Now, maybe those two individuals coexist, of course. It doesn't mean to say that the President of the United States is incapable of gardening, or indeed that being a gardener precludes you from becoming the President of the United States. I hope you understand what I mean, in the sense that it's just different. You've got to be you've got to be above and beyond, let's say, an average 81-year-old. You've got to be, as I've said before, you've got to be very mentally acute. You've got to have a lot of energy. You've got to be able to expect the unexpected and react, respond accordingly. You've got to take on board a lot of pressure. You've got to make some tough decisions and understand all the facets of the situation and also all the consequences. And so I think Joe is not the guy for that. I think there's a different standard for an 81-year-old president as compared to an 81-year-old. And also, I think it is wrong to put him through it. Now, you would also see him essentially saying, no, I'm not giving up. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to do this. And that grit and determination, well, my goodness, it's admirable in many ways, except I think it's misplaced and mistimed. I think that now is the time for someone to be saying to him, Joe, look, you know, you've had a great run at this, but really, I think that things are going to get tougher and tougher for you because of the media, the storm, everything that you do will be under a microscope. And there are likely to be these slip-ups. And if you have one more or two more or three more, then your credibility is going to be, well, lower than it is right now. And that's not a good thing at all. And also, I think in that mix with Joe, putting him through more pressure. Because, well, let me back up from that. If we don't want to be cruel to the guy, the person, and I don't think we do, I don't think that's right, I don't think that's humanitarian, then we don't want him to be in the middle of that storm, in the eye of the storm, experiencing the media glare and the pressure that the job will continue to bring, and it may become even more pressure in many different ways. If, on the other hand, Joe doesn't feel that pressure and he's just saying, I'll go on because, you know, I like this and, you know, I can do it, but he's no sense of stress, then there's also something amiss, because you should feel an element of stress. It is a stressful job. It is an important job. Managing the stress is a different thing. But if it's a walk in the park for him, then he's quite patently the wrong guy for it. And if it isn't a walk in the park for him, I think it's too much at this point in time, considering his apparent frailty right now for that job, but not necessarily for other jobs. Again, because it's at a different level, a different standard. And here's the other thing to finish off. Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, as apparently she likes to be referred to as, is, well, there's some speculation that she wants to keep him in the race. So there's some speculation that she would really like him to continue to be the president because she's then the first lady, and being part of that entourage, having that power, that prestige, is something that she finds attractive. Now, I don't know about that. I do know that it is possible because some people do get seduced and attracted to power. They get seduced by it, they get attracted to it, they want to sometimes have more of it, or at least for it to continue. And there's a little video clip that you've probably seen, that certainly I played, where she's congratulating Joe Biden about how well he's done. And I think it's cringe-making. She's talking to Joe Biden as if he was a child. And I know she's been in education, but I'm pretty sure she's smart enough to know the difference between the tonality, facial expression, gestures you would use to a child than those that you would use to an adult. And Joe, as far as I'm aware, is an adult. And so she's talking to him like he's a child. And he seems to be sort of looking at her, kind of grinning slightly. Well, it's hard to read what his expression is, but he's certainly listening, it would seem, to what she's saying. And then Dr. Jill Biden turns to the crowd and gets them to go, you know, what did Trump do? And everybody's got to shout together, lie. And of course, it's an old technique. Trump does it himself. because it works, gets people engaged and energized in the room. But if it is true, and I don't know, if it is true that Dr. Jill Biden wants Joe Biden to stay in the race because she enjoys that prestige and that power, then I think that once more that's cruel. It really isn't fair on Joe Biden. It's also potentially dangerous for the country in many ways, and it is a sort of thought process and behaviour that I find quite alien. Let me put it that way around. I also read, I don't know if it's true, that Hunter Biden is apparently one of Joe Biden's advisors, which is interesting, but maybe that's to do with keeping it in the family. So all in all, it is time for him to go. It is time for him to relinquish the reins of that and enjoy life again in a way that he will not be able to do with all the scrutiny and the pressure, which, as I say, I kind of hope he does feel going forward through this presidential race. And because, as I've said, the US is such an important country, it's such an important, well, let's say strategically important democratic society, then what happens there, one way or another, impacts everyone. And so they've got to get the right person in that position. And so I think the best way forward is for them to have a chat, for Joe, if he really wants to serve his country, if that's what he's saying, that I'm the best person for the job, I think is what he's saying. But if he's not the best person for the job, if that could be brought to his attention, his awareness could be raised, and he wants to serve his country, then the only answer is to step down and let someone else do it, like Kamala Harris or whomever. And in doing so, you really serve your country, because the debate, the contest becomes fairer. And ultimately, theoretically, you get out of those two, you get the better president. I know it doesn't always work that way, but at least it gives it a better chance than we have right now, because it isn't fair. And this is irrespective of who you support. If you step away from partisan thinking and just consider, okay, I might not like that person, I might not like some of those policies, etc., etc., etc. Step away from the emotions and consider the substance in this case, and go that way and hope they get in. And even if the person you want in, the party you want in, doesn't get in, whether it's the Republicans or Democrats, it will have been better debated, and there is a better chance that the right person will get in with a good debate, because we will understand in more detail what people represent. And although it's not perfect, and that outcome may not be perfect for you, I think at this point in time it's so one-sided, and to continue for a few months and maybe into 2025 with someone who I just don't think is up to the job is hugely dangerous. There's an existential crisis in many different ways if he does. Anyway, I shall shut up now. Those are my thoughts. Let me know if you found it interesting. For the moment, from me, bye for now.